Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into Max Weber, a name you'll definitely come across in grad-level sociology.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You've sent in some seriously dense lengths, so
Yeah.
we're here to break them down and extract those Weberian nuggets that'll help your theory classes make a little more sense.
Yeah, Weber's impact on sociology is massive, but it's important to remember that he wasn't working in a vacuum. I mean, a lot of people see him as responding to Marx, but it's more complex than a simple for or against.
Okay, so not just a Marx versus Weber debate.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's this idea that Weber kind of flipped Marx's economic determinism on its head by emphasizing how ideas can shape economics, not just the other way around. Like, think about his Protestant ethic. He argued that certain Protestant beliefs actually influence the rise of capitalism.
Okay, so the Protestant work ethic stereotype has roots in Weber then.
Yeah, you could say that, but it's deeper than just a stereotype. I mean, Weber was arguing that the specific values of ascetic Protestantism, like especially Calvinism, actually contributed to the rise of modern capitalism in the West.
Interesting.
But it's important to note that Weber didn't totally dismiss material factors either.
I see. So it wasn't just about rejecting Marx's ideas completely.
Exactly. It was more about adding nuance and complexity to them.
Okay.
Weber really believed that ideas themselves could be autonomous forces shaping history alongside material conditions. Like, for example, he studied how religious ideas, and not just Protestant ones, but others, affected economic development around the world in places like China and India.
That makes sense. That brings us to one of Weber's most famous concepts, Verstehen.
Right.
What is that all about?
Verstehen is really at the heart of Weber's interpretive sociology. It's all about understanding the subjective meaning that people attach to their actions.
Okay.
He believed that to really grasp social phenomena, we need to go beyond just observing what people do and try to understand why they do it from their perspective.
So it's about getting inside people's heads, seeing the world through their eyes.
Exactly. Like, imagine you're studying a group with a ritual that seems totally irrational from the outside.
Yeah.
Verstehen encourages you to go beyond just observing that behavior and try to understand what cultural or social context gives it meaning to them.
I see. So it's almost like using empathy as a tool for analysis.
You could say that, and to help with this, Weber used what he called ideal types. They're conceptual tools for analyzing the social world. It's important to remember that they're not meant to be like perfect representations of reality, but more like simplified models that highlight key characteristics.
Okay, so when we talk about ideal, are we talking about ideal in like a moral sense, like the ideal citizen or something?
No, not at all. Think of them more like summaries of historical phenomena or social patterns. They help us to compare and contrast different things.
Right.
For example, Weber outlines 4 types of social action: traditional, effectual, value rational, and instrumental rational. These aren't meant to describe every single action that people take, but they give us a framework for understanding the different logics that might be behind people's behavior.
Interesting. So these ideal types are kind of like mental shortcuts for analyzing patterns.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And it's important to remember that the level of detail in these ideal types could vary depending on the specific research question that Weber was tackling. They were tools tailored for specific problems, not like universal explanations for everything.
That makes sense. Now, we've been talking about understanding, but Weber didn't completely dismiss the idea of causality.
That's right. He recognized the value of both nomothetic and ideographic approaches to causality,
Okay.
which means he saw the importance of both general laws that apply across different situations and the unique circumstances of specific historical events.
So he was trying to find a balance between searching for these universal patterns and acknowledging that history is messy and complex.
Exactly, and that really reflects his commitment to a multifaceted understanding of the social world. He didn't think there were simple answers, and his approach to sociology really reflects that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, we've talked about these broader kind of frameworks, but to really get Weber, we need to look at how he actually applied these ideas. So let's start with his most famous work, The Protestant Ethic in the Spirit of Capitalism.
Okay.
That's the one that everyone knows, even outside of sociology circles. So what are the core ideas there that our listeners should grasp?
It's about more than just a simple link between Calvinism and capitalism. Weber argues that this link is part of a larger story about the rise of Western rationality, which includes everything from science and law to art and bureaucracy. It's a massive shift in how we see the world.
So a massive cultural shift that shaped how we see the world.
Exactly. And a key element of this was the idea of a calling for Calvinists. This wasn't about some mystical experience,
Oh, yeah.
but about working diligently in one's profession and seeing worldly success as a potential sign of God's favor.
Interesting. So hard work wasn't just for earthly gain, but also like a form of religious devotion.
You got it. And this combined with other social and economic factors created fertile ground for capitalism to thrive in the West, according to Weber.
We're really starting to see the world through those Weberian lenses now, but before we go deeper, let's shift gears a bit and explore Weber's work on religion beyond just the Protestant ethic.
Okay, sounds good. Weber was fascinated by religion. It went way beyond just Protestantism in Europe. He looked at world religions. He studied, the religions of China and India and ancient Judaism.
Okay, so what was he looking for in these diverse religious systems? Like, what were the common threads that he was trying to pull out?
He was really interested in tracing the evolution of religious ideas and how they impacted social life.
Okay.
He was particularly interested in how religious ethics developed and how they sort of moved from this focus on magical norms to a system that was more focused on winning a God's favor through obedience to religious law.
Okay, that's quite a shift. So from appeasing the spirits to following a moral code.
Yeah, and he saw this as like a key development in the rationalization of religious thought. Like, for example, he explored how the concept of sin evolved from like a magical taboo to like a violation of divine law.
Fascinating. So did you have any thoughts on, who or what drove this evolution?
He really highlighted the role of priests
Okay.
in shaping religious idea and ethical systems. He saw this tension between priests who often upheld these magical elements and prophets who would often challenge those elements.
That makes sense. The prophets are usually the disruptors, kind of pushing for a new way of thinking.
Exactly. And Weber was really interested in how those power dynamics within religious groups shaped the development of religious thought and, in turn, broader social structures. And this analysis of religious power dynamics actually connects to one of Weber's most important contributions, his theory of authority.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What did Weber have to say about how authority works in society?
He argued that there are three ideal types of legitimate domination.
Right.
Traditional, charismatic, and legal rational. And remember, these are conceptual tools, right? They're not meant to be perfect reflections of every real-world leader.
Right, those ideal types. Again, so not specific leaders, but categories for understanding how authority functions.
Exactly. Traditional authority rests on the belief in the sanctity of age-old rules and traditions.
Okay.
Think monarchs or tribal elders, where the authority is passed down over generations.
This is like we've always done it this way kind of legitimacy.
Yeah, you got it. And then you have charismatic authority that stems from the extraordinary personal qualities of a leader.
Right.
Think of figures like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr.
It's that magnetic pull, the power of personality that really inspires devotion.
Exactly. And then finally, you have legal rational authority, which is really the dominant form in modern societies.
Okay.
And that rests on a belief in the legality of rules and the right of those in positions of authority to issue commands.
So it's more about following the rules and trusting the system, not necessarily the individual in power.
Exactly. I think bureaucrats or elected officials, their authority is based on this established legal framework, not their personal charisma or their lineage.
Interesting. So Weber saw these three ideal types of authority as shaping how power is exercised and how societies are organized.
Absolutely. And he was particularly interested in the rise of legal rational authority in the West, which he linked to the growth of bureaucracy, a key feature of modern societies.
Okay, let's talk about bureaucracy then. What did Weber have to say about that?
He saw it as kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's very efficient and can handle really complex tasks.
Right.
But on the other hand, it can also trap individuals in what he called the iron cage of rationality, this kind of soulless, rule-bound system that stifles creativity and spontaneity.
So efficiency and order come at a cost. Individual freedom and meaning potentially get lost in the process.
That was his concern. He was very aware of how rationalization could lead to dehumanization. If it wasn't kept in check, and alongside his analysis of authority and bureaucracy, Weber also did significant work on the historical development of law.
Okay, so we're moving from the halls of power to the courtroom now. How did his interest in law connect to his broader sociological theories?
He saw a fascinating link between evolution of law and the rise of modern society. He traced the development of law from these early forms rooted in magical rituals and kinship ties to the formal legal systems that we see today.
So a journey from relying on oracles and tradition to a system based on written rules and legal precedent.
Exactly. And he argued that this process of rationalization was driven by the growing complexity of social and economic life,
Okay.
as well as the emergence of the modern state. He saw formal rationalization of law as like a key characteristic of Western civilization.
It sounds like he's highlighting how law becomes more codified and systematized as societies evolve.
Precisely. And he saw the emergence of a professional legal class, trained in universities and skilled in legal reasoning.
Right.
As crucial to this development, he argued that these legal professionals, by systematizing and codifying the law, actually played a key role in creating the legal framework for modern capitalism to emerge.
So all those late nights in law school contributed to the grand sweep of history.
Yeah, you could say that. Now let's shift gears slightly and consider one of Weber's more intriguing concepts, the 4 types of social action.
Okay.
He argued that understanding the motivations behind actions is crucial for understanding social phenomena.
Okay, back to motivations then. Let's break down these 4 types. What were they all about?
He outlined 4 ideal types of social action: traditional, effectual, value, rational, and instrumental rational. And these help us to understand the different reasons why people do what they do.
Okay, let's unpack these a bit. What are some examples of each type?
Think about why people get married, for example.
Okay.
Some people might do it because it's what their family has always done. That's traditional action.
Okay.
Others might get swept up in the romance of it all. That's effectual action.
Oh.
Some might marry because they believe in the sanctity of marriage as an institution. That's value rational action.
I see. And what about instrumental rational action? How would that play out in the context of marriage?
Someone might marry for financial security or to gain social status. That's instrumental rational action.
Okay.
It's about calculating the most efficient means to an end.
So different logics can be driving the same behavior.
Yeah.
That's a powerful tool for analysis.
Exactly. And while Weber's work often focuses on large-scale historical processes,
Right.
these concepts can be applied to everyday life as well.
I can definitely see how that would be helpful for making sense of the world around us. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground, from Verstein and ideal types to the Protestant ethic authority and even bureaucracy.
Yeah.
It's clear that Weber had a massive impact on how we understand society.
Absolutely. And I think what's really striking is how interconnected all of his ideas are.
Yeah.
It's not just a random collection of theories. They form a really cohesive framework for analyzing social phenomena.
You're right. It's not just like a collection of random theories. There's a
Yeah.
real coherence to his work.
Exactly. And I think a great example of this is how he connects his analysis of power and authority to his work on the state.
Okay, let's talk about the state then. What did Weber have to say about that?
For Weber, the state is an entity that successfully claims a monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory.
So it's all about power and control.
In a way, yes, but it's not just about brute force. Remember, Weber was interested in legitimate domination, meaning that people are actually consenting to the state's authority.
I see. So it ties back to his 3 types of authority then.
Exactly. The state can derive its legitimacy from tradition, charisma, legal rational principles, or even some combination of those.
Interesting. So like a monarchy might rely more on traditional authority, while a democracy would lean more towards legal rational
A
authority.
good way to think about it, yeah. And Weber argued that the modern state was increasingly characterized by legal rational authority, tied to the rise of bureaucracy and these formal legal systems we talked about.
Right. We talked about those earlier. So for Weber, the modern state was a highly rationalized entity.
Precisely. And he saw this as both a source of strength and also a potential danger.
Okay.
He worried about the state becoming too powerful, too bureaucratic, potentially stifling individual freedom.
So that iron cage, again, potentially trapping individuals in a system they can't control.
Yeah, he saw that as a real risk. Now, Weber's analysis of the state wasn't just this kind of abstract theorizing either.
Right.
He was deeply engaged in the political debates of his time.
So he was putting his sociological ideas into practice.
Absolutely. He was a vocal critic of German imperialism, and he argued for democratic reforms. He believed that a strong parliament was essential for checking the power of the state bureaucracy.
It's fascinating to see how his ideas weren't just these academic exercises. They were really connected to these real-world concerns.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes Weber such an enduring figure in sociology, His work speaks to both our minds and our hearts. It challenges us to think critically about the world around us.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've taken a pretty deep dive into Max Weber today.
Yeah.
From Verstein and ideal types to his analysis of religion, capitalism, authority, bureaucracy. This day we've covered a lot of ground.
And remember, this is just a starting point.
Right.
Weber's work is so rich and complex, and there's always more to explore. As you continue your studies in sociology, keep asking yourselves, what would Weber think?
That's a great takeaway for our listeners. So until next time, happy analyzing.